The first lesson today, if in the Bible, is prior to this lesson plan, is in the book of Matthew, is the Sermon on the Mount. This is where Jesus preaches the timeless rules for a good life. Consider how we in the Niles Discovery Church are called to do good works and to serve. Hear now the reading. With Jesus speaking, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything but thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under a bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light in all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." In preparation for the second reading, I read that the Jewish exiles were in Babylon about 600 BC, when Isaiah made these prophecies about the return to Jerusalem and the rebuilding of the temple. Notice how the first line relates to the first lesson as well as to the solo. "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and the thick darkness of the peoples. But the Lord will rise upon you, and God's glory will appear over you. For darkness, nations shall come to your light, and the kings the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They are gathered together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried in their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels cover you. The young camels, Midian and Ephah, and all those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord." Blessings.
Arise, shine, for your light is come. You are the light of the world. Don't hide it under a bushel basket. Well, Isaiah, if it were as simple as flipping a switch, I would do it every day. And Matthew, you've got to realize that some days I'm not sure I've got enough light for a hallway. In fact, I've been feeling that way most of this past week. The world, or at least my corner of it, has seemed very dark to me. January 6th was the 5th anniversary of the insurrection in Washington, D.C. I found myself getting angry all over again about President Trump's clemency of almost 1,600 people convicted of various federal crimes associated with the violence that day. The first anniversary of that clemency, January 20th, Inauguration Day, is just 9 days away. And then the next day, January 7th, we learned about the homicide of Rene Goode in Minneapolis, shot 3 times by an ICE agent. And then, as many of us were grieving about that death, we had to endure lies from Trump and Vance and Noem about Goode, and lies that she had endangered the ICE agent who shot her. I saw a video of the shooting, and no, Goode did not endanger that ICE agent. President Trump, if you want to know who endangers law enforcement officers, look to the 1,600 people you granted clemency to. Look to the 140 police officers who suffered assaults documented by the Department of Justice that day. some days it is hard to rise and shine. The reading from Isaiah is actually a reading assigned to Epiphany, January 6th, a day that has been stolen from me. It's assigned to Epiphany in year A of the lectionary. And yes, we talked about the Magi a couple weeks ago, a little early, a little before Epiphany, but I didn't want to exclude them as we looked at the characters from the birth narratives in Luke and Matthew during our Advent and Christmas sermon series. So we talked about those wise sky watchers a little early. But when I was planning this worship series on spiritual self-care, the Isaiah passage spoke to me, recognizing that the light has come, that our light has come, seems a good spiritual practice, an act of spiritual self-care. So here's this cheery reading, arise, shine, your light has come. On this dark day in a dark week. I have found myself wondering about the Magi who didn't make the journey. Didn't follow the star. Maybe they did leave at first, but didn't continue the journey. Matthew never says how many of these Magi, these wise sky watchers there were, just that there were 3 gifts. And so we've written hymns about we 3 kings of Orient are. But it never says how many there were and anything about how their journey started. And since I think of the Magi actually much more as a literary device than a historic incident, I feel free to imagine about them. So I wonder how many Magi left the journey, discouraged at its length, discouraged by the heat of the desert, discouraged by the dull, dreary conditions of the trek. It sure is taking a long time for the moral arc of the universe to bend to justice. The heat of the government-sponsored violence is making me hot under the collar, and this journey to wholeness is sure taking an awfully long time. I wonder about how many Magi settled for something less, setting their hearts on other things, settling for a life lived on a lesser plane. In other words, I'm thinking about the beginning of the journey, the initial invitation to follow the star. And that makes me wonder about the stars we follow. Are we following stars that proclaim the holiness made flesh? Are we following stars that proclaim things on a lesser plane? I've heard that there are 2 kinds of people. People who wake up, roll over and say, "Good morning, Lord." People who wake up and roll over and say, "Good Lord, morning." I actually think there are 2 kinds of mornings, not 2 kinds of people. Mornings where we roll over and say, "Good morning, Lord," and mornings where we roll over and say, "Good Lord, morning." There are mornings that I can wake up and I can flip the switch. Mornings when I can rise and shine, for I know my light has come. I can see the star. I know who I'm following, and the steps are easy. I'm not alone. And there are mornings when I need help. And so I'd just like to tell 3 stories. 3 stories about the mornings when we need help. Story 1. A century and a half ago, a man took a little candle out of a drawer and lit it. Then he began to climb a long, winding stairway. "Where are we going?" asked the candle. "Well, we're going to show the ships out at sea where the harbor is." "No ship could ever see my light," said the candle. "It's very, very small." "If your light is enough, keep it burning and leave the rest to me," said the man. And when the man got to the top of the lighthouse, for this was a lighthouse that they were in, He took the little candle and lit a great lamp that stood ready with its polished reflector behind it and its lens in front. Some days it may feel like you've only got enough light for a hallway, or maybe not even that much. Who carries you up the stairs so that that little bit of light can ignite others to shine? The second story comes from Robert Fulghum. You may remember him as the author of Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, something close to that title. This comes from another one of his books. This is about a man named Alexander Papadreas, who grew up in a tiny Greek village, the island of Crete. When Papadreas was a young boy, his island was invaded by the Nazis, and hundreds of his fellow villagers were executed because they dared to resist. After the war, the people of Crete held a special hatred in their hearts for Germans. Nonetheless, Alexander had a vision of building on the site of that massacre an institute where people of Crete and people of Germany could gather together in peace. He figured that if those two peoples could forgive each other and construct a creative relationship, then any people could. Papadreas succeeded. The institute became a reality. Papadreas himself became a bit of a living legend. One summer, Robert Fulghum traveled there to this institute to attend a 2-week seminar on Greek culture, and Fulghum wrote about his experience there. At the last session on the morning, Papadreas rose from his chair at the back of the room and walked to the front, where he stood in the bright Greek sunlight of an open window and looked out. We followed his gaze out the window across the bay to an iron cross marking the German graves. He turned, made a ritual gesture, and asked, "Are there any questions?" Quiet quilted the room. These 2 weeks had generated enough questions for a lifetime, but now there was only silence. No questions? Papadreas swept the room with his eyes. So I asked, "Dr. Papadreas, what is the meaning of life?" The usual laughter followed, and people stirred to go, and Papadreas held out his hand, stilled the room, and looked at me for a long time, asking with his eyes if I was serious, and saw that I was. "I will answer your question." Taking his wallet out of his hip pocket, he fished into the leather billfold and brought out a very small, round mirror, about the size of a quarter. And what he said went like this: "When I was a small child during the war, we were very poor and lived in a remote village. One day on the road, I found a broken piece of mirror. A German motorcycle had wrecked in that place. I tried to find all the pieces and put them together, but it was not possible, so I kept only the largest piece, this one. And by scratching it on a stone, I made it round. I began to play with it as a toy and became fascinated by the fact that I could reflect light into dark places where the sun would never shine, into deep holes and crevices and dark closets. It became a game for me to get light into the most inaccessible place I could find. I kept the little mirror, and as I went about growing up, I would take it out in idle moments and continue the challenge of this game. As I became a man, I drew to understand that this was not just a child's game, but a metaphor for what I might do with my life. I came to understand that I am not the light or the source of the light, but light, truth, understanding, knowledge is there. It is, and it will shine in many dark places if I reflect it. I am the fragment of a mirror whose whole design and shape I do not know. Nonetheless, with what I have, I can reflect light into dark places in this world, into the dark places in the hearts of men, and change some things for some people. Perhaps others may see and do likewise. This is what I am about. This is the meaning of my life. And then he took his small mirror and, holding it carefully, caught the bright rays of daylight streaming through the window and reflected them onto my face and my hands on the desk. Even when you think you don't have light, maybe you only need to be a fragment of a mirror whose whole design you do not know. A third story. There was a farm that had a well, a dug well that was the source of water for the family and the animals that lived there. One day, a small animal fell into the well and drowned. Of course, the carcass needed to be removed as quickly as possible, and the only person who was small enough to safely climb down into the well and large enough to carry the carcass back out of the well was one of their daughters, a young daughter. So she climbed down, and the further down she went on the hanging ladder, the darker and moister and eerier the well got, and the lonelier she felt. And then a strange thing happened. When she got deep enough in the well to be very dark indeed, she looked down into the dark, and to her surprise, it wasn't looking into darkness. The water was glistening. She realized that she could see the sky reflected back in it, only it wasn't the sky of the hot summer day, it was the sky of the night. The stars that she could not see when she stood at the well because the sun was so bright, she could only see when she descended into the well. There she found the gift of light reflected. Amen.